If you are a Linux fan like me, you have probably imagined this at least once. What if Linux Mint had its own smartphone? A beautiful device, clean interface, no bloatware, no forced ecosystem, and full control in the hands of the user. A true Linux Mint phone. For years, the Linux desktop community has grown stronger, more stable, and more user-friendly. Distributions like Ubuntu, Fedora, and Linux Mint have proven that Linux is not just for servers and developers anymore. It is for everyday users. But when it comes to smartphones, Linux still struggles to compete with Android and iOS. And that brings us to the big question: can Linux Mint realistically enter the mobile market? Or is it still just wishful thinking? Linux Mint, built on top of Ubuntu, has earned a reputation as one of the most beginner-friendly Linux distributions. It offers stability, simplicity, and a traditional desktop experience that many users love. It avoids unnecessary complexity and focuses on delivering a polished, practical system. That's why many people trust it for desktops and laptops. But smartphones are a completely different battlefield. On desktop, Linux Mint relies heavily on Ubuntu's base, which in turn relies on the Linux kernel and massive upstream development. On mobile, things become much more complicated because hardware support, modem integration, app ecosystems, and proprietary drivers all play a critical role. The biggest technical challenge standing in the way of a Linux Mint phone right now is Wayland support. Wayland is the modern display server protocol that is slowly replacing X11 on Linux desktops. On mobile devices, Wayland is essential because it enables smoother graphics, better touch handling, improved security, and modern compositing. Many Linux distributions are transitioning to Wayland, but the ecosystem is still evolving. Linux Mint, for example, has been cautious in adopting Wayland as the default, especially with its Cinnamon desktop. Stability is always Mint's top priority. But on mobile, you cannot afford to delay Wayland maturity. A smartphone OS without robust Wayland support would struggle with performance, touch responsiveness, and power efficiency. Right now, Linux Mint's focus is still clearly on the desktop. Its team does an excellent job refining Cinnamon, improving system tools, and maintaining compatibility with Ubuntu LT's releases. But building a phone operating system requires a completely different stack. It requires deep integration with hardware vendors, telephony stacks, camera drivers, GPS, biometric sensors, and battery optimization. Without mature Wayland support and a mobile-optimized shell, a Mint phone would not be competitive. So as of now, the idea of a Linux Mint phone remains more of a dream than a practical roadmap. And even if Mint somehow managed to launch a phone tomorrow, there is another massive obstacle: application support, especially banking apps. In many countries, including developing nations, smartphones are no longer just communication tools. They are financial tools. People rely on mobile banking, digital wallets, government ID apps, and secure payment systems. If a phone cannot support e-banking apps, it becomes nearly useless for daily life. This is not just a convenience issue. It is about survival in the digital economy. Most banking apps are built for Android and iOS. They rely on proprietary APIs, Google Play services, device certification, and security frameworks like SafetyNet or Play Integrity. A pure Linux phone would not pass these checks. Even if you could sideload apps, many banking apps would simply refuse to run. Without official Android compatibility layers that are stable and secure, users would not trust the device for financial transactions. And trust is everything when money is involved. This is why any serious attempt at a Linux smartphone must address Android app compatibility. Some projects have tried solutions like containerized Android environments or compatibility layers, but performance, security, and reliability remain concerns. If Mint Mobile does not support mainstream banking apps, then realistically, mass adoption is impossible. You cannot expect average users to switch to a phone that cannot handle their salary transfers, online payments, or government verification systems. This is also where the debate becomes emotional. Some people say that if Mint Mobile or any Linux phone cannot handle these real-world needs, then we are not being serious as a country or as a community. Innovation requires practicality. It is not enough to create a device for enthusiasts. It must solve real problems for real people. A serious technology ecosystem must provide full functionality, not just ideological purity. Now let's talk about Ubuntu Touch. In 2026, Ubuntu Touch is arguably the most mature Linux-based mobile operating system available. It is maintained by the Upports community after Canonical discontinued its original mobile ambitions. Despite the challenges, Ubuntu Touch has survived and improved steadily. It runs on a range of supported devices and offers a unique Linux native mobile experience. It is not Android. It is not iOS. It is something different. Ubuntu Touch uses a mobile-optimized interface designed for touch from the ground up. It integrates gestures, scopes, and a clean design philosophy. Underneath, it is still Ubuntu-based, which means it shares DNA with the Ubuntu Desktop. That common base is powerful. Developers familiar with Ubuntu can understand the underlying system. The convergence vision, although scaled back from Canonical's original dream, still exists in spirit. The idea that your phone can become a desktop when connected to a monitor remains one of the most exciting concepts in Linux mobile computing. Compared to a hypothetical Linux Mint phone, Ubuntu Touch already has years of mobile-specific development behind it. It has solved many issues related to touch, input, power management, and basic telephony. But even Ubuntu Touch faces the same major challenge. App ecosystem. While it has its own app store and web app support, the lack of native Android banking apps remains a serious limitation for mainstream users. That said, Ubuntu Linux on desktop and laptop remains one of the strongest Linux distributions in the world. It is widely used in enterprises, cloud environments, development workstations, and personal computers. Its LTS releases provide long-term stability, and its hardware compatibility is excellent. Many OEMs officially ship laptops with Ubuntu pre-installed. That level of industry support gives Ubuntu an advantage in credibility and ecosystem maturity. Linux Mint builds directly on Ubuntu LTs. That means Mint inherits Ubuntu's stability, driver support, and software repositories. This relationship is extremely important. Without Ubuntu, Linux Mint would have to maintain its own base infrastructure, which would be much more difficult. Mint focuses on user experience, while Ubuntu handles much of the lower-level engineering. This layered structure is one of the reasons Linux Mint has become so popular. When we talk about the best Linux distributions today, Ubuntu and Fedora are often at the top of the list. Fedora, backed by IBM through Red Hat, is known for cutting-edge technology and innovation. It often introduces new Linux features before other distributions. Wayland, Pipewire, and many modern components were pushed forward aggressively by Fedora. This makes Fedora highly influential in shaping the future of Linux. Ubuntu, on the other hand, balances innovation with long-term stability. It focuses on user-friendly design, corporate partnerships, and global accessibility. Between Fedora's innovation and Ubuntu's stability, the Linux ecosystem gains both progress and reliability. Linux Mint benefits from Ubuntu's base, while Fedora influences upstream development that eventually benefits everyone. If a Linux Mint phone were ever to become real, it would likely depend heavily on Ubuntu's mobile efforts or Fedora's upstream contributions to Wayland and other technologies. No distribution operates in isolation. Linux is a collaborative ecosystem. Improvements in one area often ripple across the entire community. But let's be honest, the smartphone market in 2026 is brutally competitive. Android dominates globally. iOS controls the premium segment. Microsoft tried with Windows Phone and failed despite enormous resources. Canonical tried with Ubuntu Phone and stepped back. If giants struggled, how could a community-driven distribution like Linux Mint succeed? The answer depends on strategy. A Mint phone cannot compete by copying Android. It must offer something unique. Privacy, full system control, no tracking, open source transparency, and convergence could be selling points. But these advantages matter only if basic functionality is guaranteed. Calls must work flawlessly. Cameras must perform well. Apps must launch quickly. Banking must be secure and accessible. Without these fundamentals, philosophy alone will not attract users. There is also the hardware question. Would Mint design its own hardware or partner with an existing manufacturer? Hardware partnerships are complex and expensive. Driver support is often proprietary. Modem firmware is rarely open source. Even Ubuntu Touch depends on specific supported devices because porting to new hardware requires enormous effort. A Mint phone project would need long-term financial backing, developer commitment, and manufacturer cooperation. In developing regions, affordability is another major factor. If a Linux Mint phone is too expensive, it will fail. If it is cheap but lacks app support, it will also fail. The balance is delicate. Consumers expect performance, battery life, camera quality, and seamless social media integration. Meeting those expectations with a fully open Linux stack is extremely challenging. So at this point, the idea of Linux Mint phones remains largely wishful thinking, not because the community lacks talent, not because Linux is incapable, but because the ecosystem around smartphones is locked down, app-driven, and heavily dependent on proprietary frameworks. Wayland support is improving. Linux mobile interfaces are evolving. But full mainstream readiness is still a work in progress. Meanwhile, Ubuntu Touch remains the most realistic Linux-based mobile solution in 2026. It may not replace Android tomorrow, but it represents persistence. It shows that the Linux community refuses to give up on mobile freedom. Ubuntu Desktop continues to thrive. Linux Mint continues to polish the desktop experience. Fedora continues to innovate at the cutting edge. Together, these distributions form the backbone of the Linux world. For now, if someone asks whether a Linux Mint phone is coming soon, the honest answer is no, not yet. There is still a lot lacking in Wayland integration, mobile shell development, hardware certification, and app ecosystem support. It is not impossible, but it requires more than enthusiasm. It requires infrastructure, partnerships, and strategic focus. And when it comes to serious mobile usage, especially financial services, no Linux phone can ignore the importance of banking apps. In the modern world, a smartphone without secure financial compatibility is not a serious competitor. Whether we like it or not, practicality defines success. Linux, Mint, Ubuntu, and Fedora each play vital roles in the broader Linux ecosystem. Ubuntu and Fedora are arguably the strongest distributions today in technical advancement. Linux Mint remains one of the most beloved desktop systems because it listens to users and delivers consistency. Maybe one day when Wayland is fully mature across all desktops, when Android app compatibility layers are seamless, when hardware vendors embrace open drivers, and when banking institutions support Linux-based mobile platforms, a Linux Mint phone could become reality. Until then, it remains a powerful idea, a symbol of what many Linux users wish for, but not yet a product ready for the real world. And that is the honest state of Linux Mint phones in 2026.